Fox News alert: the president set to unveil his new plan for immigration reform just hours from now in the White House Rose Garden. As we await that, welcome back to America's Newsroom. I'm Sandra Smith.
And I'm John Scott, in for Bill Hemmer. He is on assignment for his interview with the Attorney General, Bill Barr. President Trump about to announce a sweeping new plan for immigration reform, tackling border security and focusing on a merit-based system. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts live with more. John.
John, good morning to you. The president in the Rose Garden this afternoon at 2:30 will unveil his new plan. Part of it is aimed at dealing with the current crisis on the border in terms of border security. But what the president will be outlining today is a major shift in who comes into this country when it comes to legal immigration. The White House wants to move from what is traditionally a family-based system to a merit-based system. Let's put some of the details up on the screen so you can follow along here. Currently, people who come in the country on employment and skills-based immigration is 12%. They want to increase that to 57%. Family-based immigration currently is 66%. They want to reduce that to 33%. And then 10% of people will be allowed in on humanitarian basis, but they will end the visa lottery program. The president wants to initiate something that he likes to call a Build America visa that will recognize extraordinary talent, people with professional and specialized vocations, and exceptional students. Visas will be awarded on a points-based system, and the points will be awarded based on age, English proficiency, an offer of employment above a certain wage threshold, and educational and vocational certifications. Now, the Council of Economic Advisors claiming that changing the system to a merit-based system will actually increase average income and GDP. Currently, legal immigrants have an average yearly income of $43,000 a year. People who are admitted on an education and skills base have an income of $126,000 per year. So if you make that increase, you would raise the average income of legal immigrants to $96,000 a year, resulting, the CEA says, in an attendant boost in GDP, and would raise tax revenues for the nation as well. The White House says the time is right to make big immigration changes and bring the United States system somewhat in line with what other big nations like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Japan have done. Here's the press secretary earlier today.
We haven't touched this system in decades, and we've really got to bring it up to speed and make sure that, one, we're protecting our border, and two, that we're bringing people in that can contribute to our society, and that we know who they are, why they're coming, and that they can help us be productive and continue to make America grow.
Now, Democrats are not dismissing the plan out of hand, but they certainly are not embracing it. Here's Senator Dick Durbin earlier.
The president's immigration plan will be received with skepticism. For 2 years, we've tried to work with this president on the issue of immigration, even putting together a bipartisan coalition in the Senate, and the president stopped us from taking actions.
Now, a couple of things this plan will not do, and that is it will not address DACA recipients. It will not deal with undocumented migrants who are in the country currently. The White House does say that it would like to get some sort of an agreement with Democrats on immigration before the election, but this really, John, reads more as an election platform issue than it does legislation. John?
Also, I wanted to get your thoughts on that report that new images of Iranian missiles prompted the White House warnings on the Iran threat.
And we're expecting that these images will be declassified at some point today. The Pentagon is working hard on this. Satellite imagery shows cruise missiles, fully assembled cruise missiles on small boats that Iran owns in the area of the Persian Gulf. That's one of the reasons why the U.S. fleet has gone on high alert and why we've moved ships to the area. President Trump has warned Iran against taking any kind of provocative action against the United States. What is unclear is whether these missiles are a provocative action or whether they are out there as a defensive posture because of the increased military alert in the area. John?
We'll look forward to that declassification. John Roberts, our Chief White House correspondent. Thanks.
Thank you.
For more on all this, let's bring in Idaho Republican Senator Jim Risch. He chairs the Foreign Relations Committee and also serves on the Intelligence Committee. Mr. Chairman, good morning to you, and great to have you here this morning as we kick things off talking about Iran and what is viewed as the growing threat there. What about those missiles? What can you tell us about what we are seeing?
Well, first of all, I would caution. There's widely reported that these missiles are what is triggering everything. Look, there is a wide range of intelligence information gathered from many different sources in many different ways that have encouraged the president to take precautionary action. So I'd be very cautious about saying, oh, look, we have a picture and it's all based on a picture of some missiles. That is not the case at all. It is wide-ranging information, and it isn't something that has just happened. It's something that has been building as Iran has come under more and more and more pressure, as much domestically as internationally.
So that, as John Roberts just laid out at the White House, Mr. Chairman, the question is whether those missiles are a provocation or a reaction to warnings coming from the United States. Can you tell us any further on that?
You know, I really can't. These are the things we study, the photos are studied and what have you, but it is common knowledge that the Iranians are using proxies, both the Houthis from Yemen and groups from notoriously from Lebanon to do their dirty work for them. They pay them. They are their sponsors, their chief sponsors, sometimes their only sponsors. That's true with Hamas also. And they encourage them and they use them to do bad things to Americans and American interests at their direction. Whenever you see missiles moving, you want to be very cautious that this isn't the incipient stages of one of those attacks. But again, I want to caution everyone that don't use these pictures, don't use just the missile information to say this is what's causing the heat to be generated at this point.
You know, the president was asked to respond on the ground yesterday about reports that he and his team were planning to send over 100,000 U.S. troops to counter Iran if necessary. He shut that down, but then he sort of stirred a little bit more controversy with his reaction by saying, would I do that? Absolutely. What are our options as a country to respond to what we are seeing?
Well, you know, when you're doing news like this, they ask the president a specific question, and he responds to that question, and then everybody analyzes it. The fact of the matter is, America constantly, 24 hours a day, works on preparedness, works on plans, and those are molded by what's happening in a different place in the world at any one time. The president was asked a couple of questions. He responded to that. It's been greatly analyzed. I've seen it. You've seen it. Look, this president is very focused on protecting Americans and American interests around the world. He has a great team in place that analyzes what the threats are, and as threats arise or potential threats rear their ugly head, plans are made, contingencies are put in place. And I think that's what he was talking about as much as anything. And that's probably about all I can say on that subject.
Chairman Risch,
it's
great to have you answer to all of that. We really appreciate your time this morning, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Now, this Fox News alert: Alabama's governor signs a bill banning nearly all abortions in her state. The controversial new law criminalizing abortion is expected to face legal challenges and could even end up before the U.S. Supreme Court. Here's former federal prosecutor Robert Ray earlier on America's Newsroom.
Be careful about overreacting, because the lower federal courts, of course, are currently bound by the Supreme Court's decision in Roe versus Wade. So you're going to see activity in the lower federal courts first before you ever get to the Supreme Court. The country seems to want to have some balance in this and is probably going to look to reject extremes.
Jonathan Seri is following this story for us from Atlanta. Jonathan.
Hi, John. Well, the ACLU and Planned Parenthood say that they are preparing lawsuits in an attempt to block this law in Alabama before it takes effect in approximately 6 months from now. Shortly after signing the bill, Republican Governor Kay Ivey explained she disagrees with the Supreme Court's 1973 Roe v. Wade decision, which legalized abortion. Ivey said the sponsors of this bill believe that it is time once again for the U.S. Supreme Court to revisit this important matter, and they believe this act may bring about the best opportunity for this to occur. The ACLU of Alabama responded to Ivey's actions, saying, by signing this bill, the governor and her colleagues in the state legislature have decided to waste millions in Alabama taxpayer dollars in order to defend a bill that is simply a political effort to overturn 46 years of precedent. Goes on to say, we will not allow that to happen, and we will see them in court. New legislation in Alabama and other states is galvanizing support on both sides of the abortion debate. Here in Atlanta, Democratic presidential candidate Kirsten Gillibrand is preparing to speak at a women's event, which is unfolding right now at the Georgia State Capitol. They're there because last week, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp signed new abortion restrictions into law. Now, Gillibrand has said that if she is elected president, she would only select Supreme Court nominees who agree to uphold Roe v. Wade. In other words, a litmus test. John?
Jonathan Seri from Atlanta. Thank you.
President Trump ready to roll out a plan to overhaul our immigration system. He's set to do so just hours from now, and a major focus will be on the crisis at our southern border. So will Congress get on board? Former acting ICE Director Tom Homan will be here to weigh in.
Plus, U.S. officials raising the red flag on missile tests conducted by North Korea. Why they are calling those latest launches alarming. Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan sits on the Armed Services Committee. Her thoughts on the threat next.
Well, we're looking at it very seriously right now. They were smaller missiles, short-range missiles. Nobody's happy about it, but we're taking a good look, and we'll see. They're talking about negotiating, but I don't think they're ready to negotiate.
Kentucky toddler missing for almost 3 days has been found safe. Crews found the 22-month-old boy yesterday afternoon, less than a half a mile from his home, answering the prayers of his family, police, and hundreds of volunteers who had been looking for him in a wooded area for hours, looking for that little boy.
We had a team effort in the last 4 days, and we really did not give up, although today was looking like we had exhausted all of our areas.
I was froze to death and wet, and every time I think I was cold, I'd think about that baby, and then I'd about start crying, and I don't know, I just didn't want to give up on him.
Hours and days went by. Officials say, except for being dehydrated, the boy appears to be in remarkably good health. He was airlifted from the scene to a pediatric medical center for treatment. His family reported him missing Sunday evening.
Some new details now on the latest North Korean missile tests. U.S. officials say the missiles just launched by Pyongyang appear to be copies of an advanced Russian design that could be capable of evading U.S. missile defense systems. Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan sits on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee. Congresswoman Houlihan, when these launches were first reported, people suggested that it's kind of a small missile and therefore not very important, maybe not an abrogation of any agreement we might have with North Korea. It does sound that this is a little more serious than first thought.
Yes, and thank you very much for having me. And in fact, when I was active duty in the military, my job was anti-ballistic defense missile programming. And so this kind of provocation on the part of North Korea is a continued escalation, I think, that we should be worried about, particularly if it does involve Russian technology. And we should be concerned and frankly marshaling the forces that we have in terms of our international allies to try and say that this is not okay. And I'd really love to know, kind of what next steps are in terms of our process of working with North Korea to try and find some sort of an agreement together so that this doesn't continue to be the escalated situation that we're seeing. What would you urge that those next steps be? So I'm actually interested to see what our president has in store next, because I was somewhat hopeful when he, in a very unorthodox manner, started negotiating directly with North Korea, but that appears to not have been terribly successful. And so I think the next steps, frankly, ought to be more involving the international community at large. We have ways that we should be behaving with one another about transfers of technology and about use of this kind of technology, and we should be working very collaboratively with the rest of our allies to be worrying about this problem.
Meantime, tensions with Iran seem to be ratcheting up. The U.S. has pulled non-essential diplomatic personnel out of neighboring Iraq, apparently because of another, missile threat from Iran. How would you assess the danger there?
So clearly our president and the Defense Department has seen something that is concerning to them, and I think appropriately, if we are worried at all about the safety and security of any of our citizens, we should move aggressively on that. As a member of the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee, tomorrow I will have a closed hearing, closed opportunity to learn more about what the president and the Defense Department has seen, and I look forward, as you know, Congress, it's a co-equal branch of government, to make sure that we're being very thoughtful about the things that we're seeing, and that we make sure that we're not escalating things unnecessarily.
I want you to hear what presidential spokeswoman Sarah Sanders had to say this morning on Fox. Listen.
We have taken steps to move some of the diplomatic corps out of areas that we see they need to come from as we see the threat level go up. We continue to be vigilant. What we'd ultimately like to see is a behavioral change from Iran.
Quickly, behavioral change from Iran. What are the chances?
I think that they are a worrisome nation state, and I think that we need to be appropriately cautious about them. And I do agree that if we're seeing something that concerns us about the safety of our citizens, that we should be working hard to move them out of harm's way. But I also think that we need to be the adult in the room and make sure that we're not deliberately provoking larger changes than we would like.
You're an Air Force veteran. You're also part of an effort to set up a new caucus on Capitol Hill involving women who served. How's that going?
Terrific. We launched a caucus yesterday that's 51 members strong. It's a bipartisan organization that is focused on women in service, not just those who are veterans, but also those who are active duty. And that kind of had as its impetus that 4 of us now serve in Congress who are women who have formerly served. And we realized that nearly 20% of our service is now women, and that will be increasingly more and more as time goes by. And this is a population that we need to be addressing their trajectory, whether it's recruiting or active duty service or reserve duty, or when they separate and become veterans. We need to make sure that we are thinking about that legislatively, and I've been joined by 50 or more of my colleagues in worrying about that for the very first time in history.
And men as well as women, Republicans as well as Democrats. So that is a hopeful sign on Capitol Hill.
Exactly. Yeah, it's important to work across the aisle.
Congresswoman Houlihan, thanks very much for being with us.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you.
Well, colleges could soon be looking at a new number on your child's SAT score, how an adversity score could impact the competition for college admissions.
Also, Attorney General William Barr targeting the MS-13 gang, how the administration is trying to dismantle that brutal group.
MS-13 thugs, they're the worst of, probably the worst of the group, but other gangs too come in. You just don't know the names. But the MS-13 seems to be emblematic of evil.
Well, if your kids are taking the SAT test soon, you might want to listen. The Wall Street Journal reporting the College Board is adding a new adversity score. The number will indicate the social and economic background of the person taking the test, including things like crime rates and property levels in the neighborhoods that they live. Students will not know those scores, but colleges reviewing the applications will. Mary Claire Anselm is an education policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation. First, I'll just get your take on scoring this way and how it might affect people, the adversity score.
Yeah, the College Board has been taking a lot of flack lately. We learned from the recent college admissions scandal that it's far too easy to cheat on the SAT. And now come to find out they plan on assigning students' scores based on their backgrounds, on their socioeconomic level. And this is simply identity politics run amok, and it's not what America is about, and it's not what we should be teaching our young people.
But that's not what they say. So David Coleman, the College Board CEO, was quoted in this Wall Street Journal article today where we learned about the adversity score. And he says, quote, "There are a number of amazing students who may have scored less on the SAT, but have accomplished more. We can't sit on our hands and ignore the disparities of wealth reflected in the SAT." So taking that point, Mary Claire, wouldn't you look at the fact that college admissions are supposed to look at more than the SAT? They look at community service, they look at grades, they look at accomplishments, whether it's sports, music, the arts. Don't they look at a host of things that can help them determine whether to admit a student?
Absolutely, and you can't use 15 measures and assign someone a number and think that that tells you everything about their background. And you made an important point that I really want to underscore, that students won't know the scores that they are given. And so colleges will have this arbitrary number that's assigned to them, and students can contest that. Again, this isn't what America is about, and we should be a little bit more transparent in our college admissions process.
So a lot of folks are probably wondering what would play into this adversity score, because it's already being used. 50 colleges used the score last year as a beta test. The College Board plans to expand this to 150 institutions this fall and then use it a whole lot more broadly the following year. Crime rate, poverty rate, housing values, vacancy rates of a neighborhood will come into play into that adversity score. And also when it comes to the family environment of a student, things like median income of the family and whether they live in a single parent household will all be factored, among other things, 15 measures, into scoring the SAT, the score of the SAT for this particular student. And as you said, that student will not be told that score, only the colleges will see it.
Yeah, the truth is, at the end of the day, college is meant to prepare you for life after you walk off campus. And life does not give you an adversity score. This isn't something that we use in practice anywhere else in our society, and it should certainly not be a part of our college admissions. It sends a message to our young people that if you're in this certain group, then you will act this certain way, and you should be treated this certain way. And America is about meritocracy, and our colleges are reflective of that.
Well, Yale University is one of the schools that has tried using the applicants' adversity scores. They are pushing to increase socioeconomic diversity, as so many colleges are and private schools are at the lower level in the United States right now. The dean of the undergraduate admissions at Yale was also quoted in this piece saying that this adversity score is literally affecting every application that we look at. It's been a part of the success story to help diversify our freshman class. They said that they've really been having a hard time doing this, and this gives them more of an accurate reflection of the diversity that they can bring in of their students. Final thoughts from you, Mary.
Yeah, it's certainly troubling to know that schools have been doing this and we didn't know about it. But the number one thing that we can do to level the playing field for all students entering the SAT is to get rid of our assignment by zip code public schooling model and allow students before they get to college to pursue the best school that's available for them. And unfortunately, assigning a number to a student based on their socioeconomic background is just another example of our school system tying the fate of our students to their zip code.
The adversity score, I'm sure we'll learn a whole lot more about this as more institutions begin to use it. Mary Claire, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me.
It could be a breakthrough in Venezuela, what both opposition leader Juan Guaido and disputed President Maduro have just agreed to do. Plus, President Trump about to reveal his plan for immigration reform, what he wants to focus on when considering who is allowed into the country. Former acting ICE Director Tom Homan joins us live.
We've actually laid out what we want to see happen in our immigration system. We want to move to this merit-based system. Democrats right now, unless they get on board with this, the only thing they've said they want is open borders.
This critical year, 3 of the 4 most watched town halls were on Fox News Channel, and the highest rated town hall on Fox News Channel. Now, all eyes are on Pete Buttigieg. Don't miss as Chris Wallace moderates.
Fox News alert, just hours from now, President Trump will be unveiling his immigration reform plan. It would create a merit-based visa system that gives preference to migrants with coveted job skills. William Lajeunesse live at the busiest border crossing in the nation in California for us at San Ysidro, California. Good morning to you, and what is happening there?
Well, Sandra, think of immigration as 3 separate pipelines. You have illegal immigrants who jump the fence. You have asylum seekers who sometimes go over the fence, sometimes through the port of entry. And then you have legal immigrants who wait in line, often overseas, to get their green card. That's what the president wants to focus on. But his program, here in San Ysidro at least, will affect all 3 categories. Let's start with number 1. hardening the border, the port of entry. The president wants to harden that right now. Some trucks go through a X-ray, but mostly of drug-sniffing dogs do that. He wants every vehicle, 70,000 here, 20,000 people, screened individually. Secondly, you've got the fence. He wants to add fence at 33 of the most porous spots along the border, including 30 miles of new fence here in San Diego and nearby El Centro. Then finally, you have those asylum seekers, changing the rules there, that they would have to apply over on the south side of the border or stay over there until their case is adjudicated, or if they are held in detention here, keep them here as long as their case is finished. That could be 60, maybe more days, up from the current 20. But the biggest change is in legal immigration, right? That will dramatically change the demography of who is here, country of origin, and their earning profile. For instance, according to the census, a fourth of those living in poverty in the U.S. are an immigrant or their immigrant children. 44% are on Medicaid or uninsured. Half the households have someone living on welfare. So right now, in order, Mexico, India, and China are the top 3 sending countries for legal immigrants. 66% get in based on skill. That's their relationship. 66 get into the country not based on skill, but relationship to an immigrant. They could be a spouse, a family member, a child of a new immigrant. Only 12% get in on skill, and the president wants to change that.
To stop the visa lottery program where they take lottery systems and a country will put you into a lottery and then deposit you into the United States. I don't think most countries are giving us their finest.
So Democrats say this is a non-starter. Republicans say it's a first step. Obviously, Sandra, to get something, you have to give a little. We'll see what happens in the next few months. Back to you.
All right, William Lajeunesse, thank you.
More on this now with Tom Homan, former acting ICE director and also Fox News contributor. So the president has put out or is putting out his plan. Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina, also has put out a plan. Democrats in Congress have suggested that neither one of these is going to become law. What is it about those plans that, I don't know, according to Democrats, is not worth considering?
Because I think Lindsey Graham's plan is talking about closing the loopholes and stopping the open borders concept. I think President Trump's policy that I was briefed on, I went to the White House yesterday, was briefed on that plan. I liked what I heard, and because front and center, number one out of the 6 branches of this plan is border security. As William just did a great summary. It talks about, fortifying ports of entries, increase in number of inspections at port of entries. It talks about border barriers. It talks about, securing the border and closing the loopholes that cause illegal immigration to occur in the first place. As you know, Democratic senior leadership has been against anything to secure the border. They haven't offered up one fix to the current crisis on the border. Not one thing have they offered up to help stem the tide of the illegal immigration on the border. So I don't think they like the fact that the administration wants to secure the border, then expand legal immigration, and which is the right thing to do. I mean, if you look at like the family-based immigration, this plan still accounts for family-based immigration, but they concentrate on the nuclear family, parents, children. They're not talking about cousins and stepfathers, so I think it's a good plan.
Right now, most of the people who are allowed in legally are coming under family-based immigration. I want to put up a slide that shows essentially what the White House is proposing. 57% of those allowed in would be allowed in because of their employment and skill set. 33% would be family-related immigrants. 10% would be humanitarian or other entries. And then the White House wants to completely end the visa lottery program. What do you think about that overall approach?
I think it's a great plan. Look, you hear the large IT companies are begging for help, more talent. They need more talent to further expand the IT infrastructure and what they're doing. I think bringing in highly skilled labor, people that can do this type of work, also is going to it's going to protect American wages. I think that's good. And the humanitarian piece of this, people say, well, they've dropped the humanitarian visas down to 10%. But what they're going to focus on is those people that really do need our our assistance, these people around the world that really are escaping fear and persecution. The United States is always going to welcome them, but they're going to attack those hundreds of thousands of Central Americans that don't really qualify for asylum. Based on the immigration court stats now, 9 out of 10 don't qualify. So there's going to be humanitarian assistance to the world that really needs it. I think this plan is a great plan to start. I think they put it on the table to open up discussions with the Democratic leadership. Look, they're coming to the table with a plan, because right now no one has any plan, no one's talking. So let's come to the table with a plan and let's start the discussion. But I think this is a great place to start.
One of the problems we've got in this country as a result of unchecked immigration is MS-13, the international gang that has established strongholds in Los Angeles, Long Island, other places. Take a look at the numbers. I mean, you know them better than we do. 30 to 50, 8 to 10,000 of those in the U.S. Los Angeles and El Salvador are their real power centers. The president wants to take on MS-13. Can it be done? Can we win this battle?
Absolutely. When I was ICE director, MS-13 was a priority of ours. HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, a part of ICE, has arrested thousands of MS-13 gang members. They have operations down in El Salvador, working with the federal police there to dismantle and target the command and control structure operating from El Salvador. So, look, this president, the first president, put a focus on it. I arrested MS-13 members 30 years ago, but this president put a focus on it. So there has been a strong attack by the Department of Homeland Security. Now, I know William Barr, the Attorney General, is now stepping in. I think one thing we need to do is bring an all-of-government approach. It just can't be a DOJ fix. It needs to be a DOJ, DHS, and Department of State all-of-government approach so they can dismantle this organization. They put enough attention on it.
Let's hope they get it done. Tom Homan, former acting ICE director, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
A reminder that Bill Hemmer is on assignment in El Salvador right now. He's interviewing Attorney General William Barr in the AG's first sit-down since joining the Trump administration and obviously since the Mueller
How is he fighting back?
No one in this exclusive interview airs tomorrow, 9 a.m. right here on America's Newsroom.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio officially entering the presidential race this morning. De Blasio is running on his record and going after President Trump. Brian Yanis joins us now live here in studio. Hey, Brian.
Hey, Sandra. Well, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio becoming the 23rd Democratic presidential candidate this morning, launching his campaign in a 3-minute video and debuting his slogan, "Working People First." De Blasio promising to do just that by enacting the same
local
kind of
expert
progressive
advisors that will
policies
partner
as
with you to
president
find the
that he brought
perfect
to New York
place
as
and
mayor
determine
over
the
the
right
last
level
5
of
years. Policies like raising the minimum wage to $15, free pre-K for all, guaranteed paid sick leave for most workers, and health care for all New Yorkers, including undocumented immigrants. De Blasio argues as leader of President Trump's hometown, he knows how to beat him.
I'm a New Yorker. I've known Trump's a bully for a long time. This is not news to me or anyone else here, and I know how to take him on.
Protesters greeted de Blasio as he spoke to ABC's Good Morning America this morning. The problem for the mayor is New Yorkers do not think he should be running. A Quinnipiac poll in April shows 76% of New Yorkers believe de Blasio should not run. That same poll found just 42% of New Yorkers approve of the job he's doing. This morning, de Blasio defended himself.
New Yorkers have twice said that they want me to lead them. And I think about polling in general, it's not where you start, it's where you end.
Critics say New York City has gotten worse under de Blasio. Homelessness is at a historic high. The subway system is in disarray, and years of mismanagement has led to squalor-like conditions in New York City's public housing. In a tweet, Sandra, President Trump called de Blasio a joke. De Blasio's nickname for the president, Con Don. And the New York Post this morning, brutal, showing people laughing at the thought of his campaign. Sandra.
I saw that. Brian Yanis, thank you.
Of course.
Well, the battle over the president's tax returns continues to heat up. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin suggesting it could go to court as the clock ticks down to a deadline from House Democrats. Grover Norquist weighs in on that next.
Issue that has a precedent way beyond any one president in Congress, affects the weaponization of the IRS and could be used against anyone.
Big arrival coming to the White House. The president is awaiting the arrival of the Swiss Confederation president, Wally Maurer, at the White House. It is thought that because the Swiss handle communications with Iran, this may be part of the effort between the United States and Iran to come to some kind of an agreement that falls well short of military conflict. Because obviously the White House is unhappy with what Iran has been doing in the Persian Gulf area. So the president of the Swiss Confederation about to arrive at the White House. We will keep an eye on that meeting, let you know more as we get it.
There is a difference in interpretation between Congress and us and the Department of Justice around this law. And if this issue goes through the courts, I think it's better that we have the court's interpretation. If there is a difference, then establish a precedent that is weaponizing the IRS.
Treasury Secretary Mnuchin there testifying before a Senate panel suggesting the battle over the president's tax returns could end up in court as the White House faces a deadline tomorrow to hand over 6 years of filings to the House Ways and Means Committee. Grover Norquist is the founder and president of Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Where does this fight ultimately lead? House Democrats do not seem to be stopping.
Well, I think it'll go to court because it's a very important issue. We give the IRS a lot of our money. We also trust them with our privacy. You don't tell your neighbors how much money you earn. You expect when you tell the IRS what you earned and what you did with it and how you invested and what you own, and you give them all that private information about yourself, that they would keep it private. What have we learned over the years? Movie stars found that the IRS was passing it around like candy. Oh, look at how much somebody makes or what they're doing. Richard Nixon, between when he was vice president and president, was audited every year for 8 years by the Democrats. There's a reason he thought he could go to the IRS and look at other people's IRS filings. Luckily, they said no, but I understand why he thought he could do it, because people did it to him. We ought not to be having the IRS violate people's privacy, period. And when it's a political game, looking at what Trump did for a living before he was president, this is ridiculous.
But if you talk to Democrats, they're going to say that the most transparency possible with the president of the United States is best.
Well, it doesn't stop with the, okay, how about if we start with congressmen? Do they think that's best or only somebody else? And they didn't think it was best when they had a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate. They could have done it then with Obama, but they didn't. So it's just politics, and it's dangerous politics. Look, totalitarian states have files on everyone. So does the IRS. So it's very important that we keep privacy there and not have them be thrown out. They want this to leak it.
So I hear you talking about the dangerous precedent that this would set, Grover. And when he was appearing before that Senate panel, the Treasury Secretary, Stephen Mnuchin, very critical of Democrats' demands here. He said that this would lead to a, quote, weaponization of the IRS. Do you share the same fear?
Absolutely, but the IRS has been weaponized before. In the 90s, there was a congressional commission set up on restructuring the IRS. I served on that. And the IRS had a terrible problem of not keeping it. Tried to make it better so that they're less likely to violate other people's privacy. But during the Obama years, they were handing out people's campaign contributions, that data, which then people were attacked for politically in California and other states. The IRS doesn't do a good enough job now with people's privacy. We shouldn't be poking holes in it to make it even more likely that they abuse it.
Well, we await a formal response from Mnuchin. The deadline's tomorrow. He also wouldn't say whether or not the president had told him. He said the president had not told him how to handle this demand. So we'll see what happens next. Grover Norquist, good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you.
A Fox News alert. Wally Maurer, the president of the Swiss Confederation, just arriving there at the White House. I mentioned earlier this could involve negotiations with Iran. It also might involve Venezuela. The U.S. has pulled diplomatic personnel from Venezuela. The Swiss are representing our interests there. This was a surprise invitation extended to President Maurer. There you see both presidents. We'll keep an eye on it and keep you updated.
A great white shark weighing in at more than 21 100 pounds, is heading towards North Carolina's Outer Banks. According to researchers who are tracking the shark, they've named her Luna. The team seen hauling her up onto their boat and fitting her with an electronic tracer. They got a ping from that device last week about 100 miles southeast of Charleston. Wow.
I love sharks in general and great whites.
Wow, look at that.
She is spectacular.
Amazing footage there.
I hope she has a good trip.
Yes, indeed.
Don't get in her way.
We do not need another Iraq weapons of mass destruction moment where we were falsely led into a military engagement in Iraq, which was one of the biggest mistakes we have had in foreign policy. This is like making foreign policy and national security decisions in the blind. And so I've never seen an administration that is less forthcoming about such critical information.
A growing number of lawmakers calling for transparency as the White House moves American assets in response to a potential threat from Iran. The New York Times reporting the moves are in response to new photos showing Tehran had loaded missiles on boats in the Persian Gulf. Joining us now, Republican Congressman from Wisconsin, Mike Gallagher. He is a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congressman Gallagher, what do you know about the Iranian moves, and what do you think about the U.S. response?
Without getting into any classified reporting, obviously, it is my belief that the threat from Iran is credible. It is multifaceted. It is a threat to our own troops and our allies in the region. And therefore, I think we need to be taking appropriate steps to deter Iran from further action. I think pre-positioning assets, moving a carrier strike group, moving bombers will send a signal of strength that will hopefully convince the Iranians not to lash out any further. The fact that they're lashing out should not surprise us because their economy is being squeezed right now. The regime is in a very precarious and weak position right now since we've decided to eliminate the waivers of sanctions and impose additional sanctions.